Hey, this is Karen, Coach's Corner Chats, and joining me is Frank Carrozza. Frank, where are you at, and what are you up to?
Sure. Right now, I am the head women's soccer coach at Lebanon Valley College, which is in Annville, Pennsylvania, and is a Division III private school, kind of in the neck of the woods by Hershey.
How long have you been at Lebanon?
This is really going on my second year, my third season. When I first got hired, it was in about June/July, a couple of years ago, and then just transitioned in and kind of picked it up and ran with it there. So it's about my third season, but really only second year so far.
When you took over the program, what were some things that you tried to put in place to develop a foundation to hopefully build success?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because when I first got the job, I kind of had to meet the team through doing Zoom meetings. So a lot of it was scheduling one with every single returning player, getting to know them, and then just getting to know what they feel they needed more of. So things that were just kind of expressed to me when I first came in from the transition side was they felt like they needed a little bit more consistency in terms of some leadership and some decision making. They kind of felt like they were very conditioned well, but from the soccer side, they were missing some things. So things that we tried to implement right away without scaring people off and doing too much too early was a leadership program that I ended up using as a project that I did for the United Soccer Coaches for their Master Coach course. But that was something that's really been in the background that for the last couple of years, I felt being able to create a culture and being able to change identities and create team chemistry the way you wanted them to be so that they went well with your philosophy was kind of the angle of approach. So I really wanted to develop something that kind of helped with that, where it was building trust, building some accountability, but also showing them or educating the players on what is it that we're actually looking for within leadership within our program. So that was kind of where we went. We implemented a program there. We brought in a expert speaker, Molly Grisham, who does very, very well with leadership and team architecture. So we brought her in during preseason to help us out a little bit. And then outside of there, it was just a big change while doing it slowly was really the style of play. Each coach has their own way of doing things and their own preferences. And like we've talked about a little bit in the past, is I share a love for positional play and Todd Bean and the culture that they have over in Spain. So that was something I really took a grab of and held on to and wanted to learn as much as possible. And that was something that I wanted to bring with us from the last school that we were just starting to learn about it to now I feel like we have a much better grasp on it. And that was what I wanted to implement with the new team. So honestly, they did very, very well with it. I was very happy with what they've done. And the more that we continue to grow and kind of learn about the background and how the style works, the more we can kind of give back. So it's been really fun and exciting the last basically 3 seasons with them. Yeah.
You talked about talking to the players and getting feedback. How important was it to not just one hear them, but then to actually make some like moves that dealt with what they shared?
Yeah, I mean it's important because I feel like you have to connect and you have to put a face with a name. Because when I came in, it was the summertime, so I wasn't really going to have access to any of those players or be able to meet them and get to know them. So the big piece of it was getting to know their personalities and their characters to understand what I was working with or what I was walking into. The second part to it was really, really valuable. I mean, they were able to share insights on the character and temperaments of each other as teammates, where they felt like they struggled, their teammates struggled, and then where the program struggled. So it was a really eye-opening experience because they broke it into a lot of different sections and pieces, and they gave me a really good understanding of what they've been exposed to, what they like, what they don't like, and then obviously where we were going with things. So I think in the end of the day, they're going to like some stuff and dislike some stuff, but it gave me a really great background as to what they've been exposed to. And then it was just a slow drip of change from there. I feel like if we came in guns a-blazing, it's the easiest way to make a mutiny or make people just start to really not want to dive into what you're trying to do. So we tried to make those changes super subtle and slow over the last 3 seasons. And I feel like that definitely worked way better than just coming in and being like, okay, we're scratching it all and we're starting over again. That change scares people. So I felt like that was the best way.
As you look back on soccer, when did soccer become part of your life? Were you playing as a young youth? Like, when did this experience of soccer and the love of it?
Yeah, that's a great question because growing up, I was a three-sport athlete, and I definitely felt my skill sets or the foundation of my sports were better or stronger in other sports. So I grew up in a wrestling household. My father was a wrestler. He coached wrestling. His brother coached wrestling and wrestled. His sister was into wrestling. So like we came from a very big background of wrestlers. Anytime arguments broke out, it turned into a wrestling match in the living room. So we were doing wrestling. Off season wise, we were doing baseball because on my mom's side we had baseball ran in the family. Her dad, back when he was alive, was a professional baseball player when the Dodgers were in Brooklyn. So this is going way back. So I really enjoyed that. And then I just got into soccer. It was something where I didn't have any experience with it, but I guess somehow we just decided, hey, let's just try this. And I actually enjoyed that sport the most, but I actually felt like I was the least trained and the least ready to take on that sport at the next level. I don't know what about it, if it was the team environment or if it was just a sport in general. I didn't have a lot of technical skill growing up with that sport. It was basically watching TV, going in the front yard, and I had a huge PVC goal that was made out of like plumber's tubing. So it was like super fat. And I would just spend hours outside just messing around with a ball. And I felt like that's kind of where a lot of stuff came from, was just watching, going out and messing with it. Could I do that trick? Could I do that? But I was never really like formally trained at all until really I got to about college. That's where I started to understand tactics and the technical side of things. So it was a very interesting trip for me because I felt like I was better in other sports. So yeah, I just enjoyed it the most, and that's what I ended up taking up in college. Believe it or not, is I had an offer to go wrestle at some high levels. That it was interesting, but I just wasn't into the sport at that point. And baseball, I liked it, but I wasn't fully, I don't think, prepared to take on the college level in that sport. So I just ended up following the passion and love, and soccer was it.
What was that decision like when you have that wrestling side of the family and you have a baseball, and then you kind of decide to not chase either one? How difficult, or was it difficult to kind of like, I'm going to follow my heart? And what did your parents think of that?
My parents were great with it, and I honestly have zero complaints over how they facilitated choices or how they introduced me to things. They never put the pressure on me. Like, say, my dad's side was very strong in wrestling, and you hear word on the street when you're growing up and you're going to different tournaments in high school and middle school and all that, and like, oh, so and so's son, and you expect them to be good and all this and that. It was nice. I enjoyed it, but I don't know. I really didn't get into it. And I think a lot of it was the miseducation on my part. Like, my dad tried to have fun, introduce me to the sport, but he tried to kind of be hands off and not pressure me with things. And the same with baseball on my mom's side. So I think I ended up putting more pressure on myself to hit a certain standard or want to so-called keep up the value of my family name in that sport. But really I was just doing it to myself. Like, they were fantastic with taking me and making sure that I had breaks and I had different sports so I wouldn't just do one all year round and get burned out of it. They were great with that stuff. So I have honestly zero complaints growing up. I think I did it to myself in terms of, well, you got to be good at this and you have to win at this. And I just ended up following the soccer path. I felt like it was the less stress put on myself. I wanted to do well, but there was no expectations because it didn't run in the family. And I just enjoyed the environment. Every team I was a part of, I enjoyed the players I was with. I enjoyed the coaches I was with. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of exposure to the sport. Like, we didn't really have club teams back then. People got recruited off high school teams. And like, my college coach came to see me play baseball. He never even saw me play soccer. Because he was a soccer and baseball coach. So we were both in season at the same time. I had no idea what video was or how to cut that and how to send those for recruiting tapes. So he actually came and watched me play baseball. It ended up being probably the longest game of my career. I thought the guy was never going to call me back after that because I had him there for like 3 hours. But yeah, it was just a different world and kind of a wild experience finding my college path a little bit.
Let's talk about that college experience. When you look at it, what are some of your kind of takeaways or memories that stand out for you?
It was definitely the environment. I think when you go into college, what you start to realize is the people that kind of have that pick or choose mentality or the investment in that sport start to fade away. So you're surrounded a lot more by people that have that strong interest or passion that kind of drives you to want to do more. You start finding that environment that just seems like it fits, it clicks, and you like who you're around. I mean, you don't have to be best friends with everybody, but we all shared that common goal of wanting to do better, wanting to win, wanting to put the team in a good place and bring notoriety to the team. So I think it was just a matter of, at the time I went to school, we weren't a lot of good soccer players. We were good athletes that were just we were athletic. We worked hard. And then the coach had the challenge of teaching us how to put the round ball in the big white box. That was the part where I felt like everybody had to come together on. So it was different. I mean, it's just, I enjoyed the people I was surrounded by. I enjoyed the hard-nosed training and how I grew up. It was, you earned the playing time you got, you earned your position. So like the way everything was run matched up with how I was brought up. So I just really enjoyed my experience with it. And then by the end of my senior year, I felt like I actually somewhat knew a little bit about the sport. And I was like, well, now I'm graduating. Like, now what? Like, I want to keep playing, but like most people end at this point. So where do I go from here? And I feel like there's only a couple routes. Like, you can try to play as long as you can, but physically at some point you break down a little bit. And then it's really coaching or officiating. And I feel like officiating, you're getting it from everybody. You get it from the fans, you get it from the players, you get it from the coaches. Coaching, okay, maybe I'll get it from some of the players. I felt like maybe that was the route to go, but really it was just to keep me connected to the sport. And I've loved it, and I haven't looked back since. So I've really enjoyed it, but it was definitely a surprise to me in the beginning. That was the sport I ran with.
So you make this decision of like, I think coaching might be something I want to do. How does Frank even get that first start? How do you get your foot in the door?
Yeah, another very humorous story, because I had no idea what grad assistants were at the time. Like, my father was somewhat understanding of what there was a position that existed like that, but when they went to school, it wasn't really big then either. So it was finding out what opportunities were out there. But I feel like I didn't really know where to look. I didn't know what it was called, what to do. I was probably still a little bit shy to go ask my coach in college, like, what should I pursue? So my first out of the get-go, I had an extra semester at college because I enjoyed it so much. I stayed an extra semester. And I picked up a youth team, and it was a U13 boys team. And I think that's probably where most of this ended up going, is from the understanding of how to figure out, how do I excite them, how do I teach them, and how do we just keep things going. It's been a long road. So I went from a U13 boys team to a high school boys team to a U13 or 14 girls club team to back at my alma mater, but now on the women's college side. And then I did some semi-pro women. So I was all over the place, but it was a matter of, once I got a taste of it, it was figure out what coaching is, and then it was, where do you belong at that time. So like, learn the basics, get better, then take on a little bit of a higher level. I craved the competitiveness. I think that was the one thing when I was coaching the youth in high school. I wanted that competitiveness of the college environment, but I wasn't ready for that yet. Like, when I went back to the college environment, I had to go back as an assistant because I still needed to figure out, how does all that work. It's a lot more than just rolling a ball bag out there and throwing a couple cones and doing random drills. So it was not a self-taught journey, but it was a lot of, you don't know it, no one's willing to help you. You got to go find out if this is what you want to do. You got to go find a way and figure out what this is. So a lot of my coaching has honestly been that. It's been just figuring out, because soccer didn't run in my family, like, how does this work? Where do I get the education? So I think that's where you had to really decide, if this is what you want to do for a living, you need to be good at it, and you need to go figure out how this works. Otherwise, you're not going to last very long. And there weren't too many 9 to 5 sit in a cubicle jobs out there where I felt like my attention span would work well with. So I felt athletics and teaching were the things that ran in the family. Now let's figure out, how does that work for Frank?
At what point, going through all those and you talking about I went in as an assistant, what was it that kind of gave you the idea of like, all right, it's time to make the jump to head coaching? I feel like I've got enough in my backpack of coaching skills to be successful?
That's a tough one. I don't know. I have the mentality of and I feel like I probably share this with many people as you search for that perfectionist side of things. Like you never feel like you're good enough, and I feel like that kind of it helps keep me grounded and humble. But at the same point, I think it does kind of have a little bit of a holdback sometimes on you. But like that always made me drive to want to know more. Like I never wanted to go and take on a team and be able to not be able to teach them or get them better and I feel like that would embarrass me if I couldn't help them and I'm in this role where they're looking to me for education and direction and I just didn't have it. So I guess it constantly pushed me to having to figure out what programs are out there, how do I learn how to do this, what coaching education is out there, could I go get mentored by somebody. So for me, the big mentor piece, I think, after I was trying to do it on my own for a little bit with the youth and high school teams and realized it's not as easy as it looks on TV or when you're playing and you're looking at your start, like where's my education come from? And I think that's really where it started to take off was I was introduced to a women's head coach at Misericordia, Mark Stoffer, who's actually still there today. He was nice enough to bring me in, not really knowing much about me. I dated a girl that was on his team at the time. She was on the way out graduating. She talked very highly of his coaching and his ability to be able to connect with people. And I just felt like that was a starting place. I felt like if I went back to my team on the men's side, I was too close in age where I don't know if I would have been perceived as a coach or if I would have been able to make the impact that I wanted to make. So I felt like I needed to go somewhere else before I came back to the men's side where it was closer to my age, where I felt a little more comfortable being that separate, that coach, not the former player that just lays cones down that wants to help. Like I wanted more. So I guess you can kind of boil it down to like I needed to figure out what my identity was. Like, do I really want to do this? And if so, are you willing to put everything you have into it? Because if you do, you have to go all in. Like you can't go halfway or you're just not going to survive, in my opinion. So that's again, I think that's just where it is like me feeling like I don't have enough yet. Like there's more I can learn and I can do more. I feel like that's just the constant drive. Like I'm telling myself constantly, I don't have the ability yet. Keep going. So in a weird way, that's my drive.
You mentioned her talking highly of him. When you look back at your experience being on, so, it's different when you're a player being coached by him. What was it like to see the behind the scenes of how he was successful with developing those relationships and some of those things that were positives that you've latched onto and now created in your program that you have now?
Yeah. It's funny because I have this conversation with my current assistant all the time. I said, after a couple of years, you start to realize it's not really the X's and O's that you're really craving. Those you can kind of get from watching, talking to a friend, or going to a coaching course or watching a video or whatever. A lot of where my learning really took off was when I had the opportunity to be able to be in the office more than just for the hour or the couple minutes before you went to the 2 hour practice. I started to realize the conversation of players that they stop in during the day. Maybe it might be because they need something, or maybe they're struggling with something, or maybe they just want to stop by and say hello. It was the figuring out of the building of relationships. Then it was like the office work. In Division III, you always have a secondary duty. At Division I, maybe you're lucky enough where you can just kind of focus on the coaching. So it was, well, what is this second duty that you take on? How does that work with your coaching? Because normally that makes you full time, the secondary duty. So you start to just see a different, almost like the behind the scenes of how everything works. You see how the recruiting works. It's not like players just magically show up on preseason and then they're good. Like I was sent on the road. I had to sit in the cold. I hated every minute of it. And I was like, but I get it. When this person to this side leaves and this one to this side leaves, are you willing to stick it out and sit in the cold and look for the player and be like, you know what? They left. I see that player. Now I got a chance to get that player. So it's little things like that I didn't know existed. So it was very, very eye opening. And then from there, I really kind of branched out and went a lot of different directions once I left Misericordia to find some more education. But Mark was very instrumental in helping me get started. I was using my youth team as kind of like my guinea pigs, where I'd learn things at the college practice. I'm like, okay, this is a tough topic. How do I teach this, but to younger ages and not go over their head? So I'm teaching myself and I'm teaching them. But it was an interesting way. You have to do a lot of connecting of the dots and figuring out your own way to see if you could actually do this. So yeah, it's been crazy.
One of the themes that keeps coming up is just kind of trying different things. It was multiple sports. You tried different levels of coaching at the beginning. And even there, you talked about even after that experience at Misericordia, that now you are still branching out and trying. Have you always been one that's kind of dabbled and taken bits and pieces to try to kind of, I don't know, not necessarily make a solution, but figure some things out?
I'm gonna go back to my younger days when you're just a stubborn kid and you don't want any help and you don't want to ask anybody. I think that's honestly where it stemmed from. Um, Not that it's a bad thing, because I understand the importance now of you have to ask people for help. You can't go about it yourself. Like, you need the support of other people. But I think deep down, I never wanted to deal with that. Like, I always wanted to be able to do it perfect the first time and excel at it. And if it didn't work out, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna find a way to make this work, because I don't want to ask for help. I don't want somebody else to do it for me. So it's a little bit of a naive outlook on it, but at the same point, I kind of actually relate it back to wrestling and the mindset it created for you. Whereas wrestling's an individual sport, and when you're out there competing, you can hear coaches, but there's no timeouts, there's no stopping actions. You just got to roll with it, figure it out, and do it yourself. I kind of rolled that into life a little bit, where I was like, I don't need help. I don't want help, even though you do. But I'm going to figure out how to make this work. And a lot of times it was funny, because you kind of come back full circle. It's, I don't want help, but what you were seeking out was actually a resource that was support and help. It was just not maybe another person. So you didn't have to say, well, I didn't have to ask for help. Really, you still asked and looked for help. So like an example of that, when I left Misericordia and I went to my first head job, I needed to figure out recruiting, because recruiting was so different from one school to the next. The majors, the pulls, the environment, the whole nine. I went to a Dan Tudor recruiting convention. And all that was is a ton of coaches and a ton of people that excel in the backgrounds, and they just share ideas about recruiting. There was a rodeo coach there, and it was crazy because he was the only rodeo coach in the entire room, and there was hundreds of coaches. And the things you took away was the marketing. How do you market your program knowing that there's not a lot of competitors sitting in the crowd? Nobody else shares that sport. So, like, where do you find your way to market, to recruit? Like, how does that work? So, like, those are the opportunities that really brought the education, and that brought me the help that I so-called didn't need, because now I'm listening to the soccer coach from Notre Dame, the soccer coach from BYU, the football coach from Notre Dame. Like, you're just getting all of these great ideas, and then it's just a trial and error. What works for me? Like, I remember one early on that I was so excited about it, and then later on I was like, this is honestly really silly. Why am I doing this? It was a fake diploma thing. Like, and a lot of it was to make a connection with the parents, the player, and myself. So how it all worked was somebody would come and visit me on a recruiting trip, and basically I'm trying to paint the picture of, okay, I walked you through your 4 years here. Now I want to walk you through at the end of graduation. I want to have a relationship with you where I get the chance to meet you afterward, shake your hand, say congratulations, and we continue to keep in touch from there. So I had my old graduation gown. I had the hat. I would make a fake diploma, and we would do the whole, like, not a fake ceremony, but like kind of like a fake dry run through a little bit. Just be like, this is what I want to give to you, or this is how I would like us to continue to develop. And up here, it was a fantastic idea. And a couple of them we nailed pretty well. But then when you go a couple of years down the road, you start to realize, like, you know what? All I'm doing right now is making parents cry because they're getting emotional that they're seeing their little girl get ready to graduate, even though it was a mock setup. And it's not really having the time that I wanted. It's fast forwarding through you already being here. So I ended up doing away with it. But like ideas like that, it was something different. Not everybody was doing it. So have the guts, go try it and go see what happens. And then you can always adjust from there and change it. And honestly, that's what I love about Division 3. Not that it's not important to get results and to grow a program and develop, but it takes a lot for the results to remove you from Division 3. Like, you really have to be screwing up in a lot of different facets to kind of get pushed to the side with Division 3. Like, you have to be a little bit of a jerk, not know your sport, and just do things a little bit on the wrong way to kind of get removed. Versus, say, Division 1, like the expectation is we have to win. So the reason I reference that is you can almost reinvent yourself every single year in Division 3. So that's what I kind of felt like I was doing on the recruiting side. Was I was trying to reinvent and figure out, how do we make people excited to come to this school where there's been no tradition, no winning? How do we do that? And there's like, just use a random package to send them a thank you card instead of sending it in an envelope because they're not excited about it. We got these round red tubes that were maybe about that long. And it was just a mail tube like you would see in the TV shows where you shove it up the mail chute and off it goes. And you would just address that and send it. And it was crazy, the feedback I was getting on. They're like, Coach, we had no idea what it was. It was so cool. We didn't know. And they open up and it's just a postcard. But like, the thrive or the rave about it was just crazy, just because it was in different packaging, just so it stood out and it was delivered to the player, not the parent. So those are the things that I was seeking out. Once I left being mentored, I was like, okay, I need to do more. That's the type of stuff that I now push onto my assistants. Instead of doing it my way, let's put you in a room with 100 other people and just learn different ways to do the same thing. And then you find your way. That's more of the take I have now versus when I first started.
So when you first started and you start going, how long are you at that first stop as a head coach?
I ended up being there for 12 years. The first year, I lost more than I think I lost in my entire life in all sports combined that I played. It was brutal. I think we were like we were 0-18-1, I think. So I was like, okay, I absolutely hate losing. Like, what do we got to do to fix this? Because I came from the opposite end of the spectrum where we were winning and never losing. Now when I'm on the other side, I'm like, okay, like, wow, like, I don't like this feeling. I know they don't like this feeling. How do we do this? So that's where the recruiting came in, and we were hammering that hard. But I think the landscape changes. Like, every couple of years, the private versus state school changes, the setting around your school changes, the academics and certain things going on within schools change. So I think a lot of it is just keeping up with where your school is going. Like, one of the past schools I was at had a little bit of a city setting, and it was a little bit of a rougher area. So for the first couple years, we were doing fine. Then the area started to change a little bit. It started to get a little bit rougher. There were some things going on at nighttime that weren't great. So now all of a sudden, now recruiting's getting affected. How do I convince mom and dad to let Susie come play soccer for me when all they're seeing in the paper is, oh, there was a mugging, or oh, there was a shooting, or oh, and it's blocks away from campuses? Like, you're not going to be able to sustain recruits or interest when all of a sudden that tends to start being a little bit more prevalent in an area. So at that point, that was where I was like, okay, things are changing, and what I want to do with my career, I feel like I was close to maxing it out at that time at that place. So I needed to find something else where I could keep going, where I could make the program that I felt like I wanted to, that was up here, with some of the similarities of where I came from. Like, that was just kind of a little bit of process. So I was lucky enough to end up at Lebanon, where I'm at now. And I honestly couldn't be happier. It's been a fantastic experience.
I was just going to ask, what was the draw to Lebanon Valley? You kind of talked about maybe just the mixture of player and location and stuff like that. How important was that? And what was it that kind of drew you to say, hey, I want to set roots here and try to build a program?
Yeah, that's a great question, because again, I think that one comes with time and maturity within the occupation. I think in the beginning, we're a little naive because we think we could just win anywhere, any school, in any capacity when we get there. And then you start to realize there's a lot of little X factors that go into the college search with people that really separate the type of program you want. Like you can go to a place, take a head job, win a bunch of games, but when you go to a national tournament, some of those teams are losing 12-0. But you can say, I won a conference, but you're maybe not winning a national tournament. If you want something more, then you're like, okay, well, now I need to find something where I'm picking maybe a higher soccer IQ kid, somebody that maybe likes to do it 3/4 of the year, where this person is only doing it for the 3 months in the fall. You start to realize just what's needed to be able to, if you want to win a national tournament, ultimately, I think that's where all the competitive people want to go is we all want to win a national tournament. Now, no one's going to care except for us when we win it, but like that's just the ultimate goal is everybody wants to get to that phase and say, we were able to win a national tournament. And you start to realize like the school and the academics have a huge influence on that. So for me with Lebanon Valley, it was they're located in a great part of the state where I'm close to Hershey Park, which is obviously a sell with concerts, rides, everything else there, and entertainment. It's in a safe area. Like I think I have a greater chance of getting trampled by a cow than I do getting shot by a drive-by. So it was just the opposite end of the spectrum there when I made the change. The academic profile was a bit higher. So the kid that I'm now getting is a little bit more invested into studies, whether it's soccer or not soccer, they're just a little bit more invested into that academic side. So those are the things that I feel like I can use that. So for me, instance, like we do journaling with soccer. If a kid likes the academic side and being accountable in academics, me introducing journaling into my soccer practice, now they're going to be like, oh, it's cool. It's something different. It's a little bit of an academic twist to it, but it helps with retention of soccer. Those kids will buy into it. Where some people in other teams that I had in the past, they were just like, this is dumb. I don't know why we're doing this. It's practice. I don't really care what we did. We just got to win the next day. So it's a little bit of a different maturity, a different want, I guess, with your soccer career. So for me, when I found this opening, I was lucky enough to be able to get the job, and it's been great. I mean, it's the last couple schools I went to, I had to go to every showcase, turn over every rock and stone to figure out what kids might be interested in school. With the profile I'm at now, more of the kids now are inclined to reach out to me versus me basically dry recruiting everything, where I just went and would sit at a tournament, see kids that I liked, write them down, go back to the office and call an email and just hope that what they were looking for, we had at the school. Now I don't really have to do it that way because people actually have an interest in the school. So now it's like, hey, coach, I have an interest in nursing. I know you got a brand new nursing program in school. Would you come take a look at me? And then when I go see those kids, the player is a bit better than what I was rounding up at maybe a different area. So I think it is important. And that was the jump, that the reason why I made it. I felt like the area at the last place was getting rough. It was getting harder to sell to females. It was an all-male school before it went co-ed. So a lot of the majors were male driven. So there was just a lot of chips stacked against you that if I could find some place that was a little bit more attractive, a little bit safer, I felt like I could just grow what I wanted to grow in terms of a program more. So that was a driving force for me. Is I needed a change so I could go further and see what else I could do with the building part.
You mentioned being in that recruiting thing with the coach that dealt with rodeo, and one of his comments was, "It's all about marketing." And one of the things that has kind of drawn me and connected me with you is one, you love to share lesson plan, like not lesson plans. Sorry, my teacher coming out, but coaching plans and your setups and all that, and how Todd Bean and Tovo has kind of influenced that. And then on the other side, when it comes to LVC, you have the girls there's like TikTok style stuff being shared, and there's a lot of like, how important is that embracing that the new social media and putting your stuff out there, and why even dare put, like, some coaches would be scared to death to put their their coaching plan out there, or to let
Yep.
their players have, I don't want to say personality, but have fun and actually put it out there. How important has it been for
Ownership
you
of it.
to do that?
Yeah, I'd be lying to tell you that it didn't make me nervous in the beginning with it. And I'll kind of break it into twofold. From the player standpoint and getting them involved with social media, I think the world has just changed so much that when you use social media, your reach is so much greater. You can reach the people that you don't know that normally, when that didn't exist, people weren't finding about you and you weren't finding out about them. Like years ago, I probably wouldn't have found Todd Bean. I was lucky enough that a coach down the road from me when I was at a different school, we were both seeking out more opportunity. He fell across Todd's stuff. We talked about it. He went out to Spain the year before I did. And when he came back, we were talking, and that's kind of what influenced me to go about it. So it's such a longer process. And I was only because I was lucky enough to have that dialogue with the coach down the road. Otherwise, I don't know if I ever would have fell upon it. So for me, I think it opens so many different doors. Like you hear all the negatives and you hear the bad parts about it, but there's also a lot of good parts about it. So like for us with the social media, a big part of showing why come to Lebanon Valley and why play for us was we wanted to show what we did at the school, what the school looks like, but we wanted to give exposure to the players and say, okay, these are the personalities that are here. Do you like the personalities? Because in the end of the day, people come to your school, but they don't come there for us. They come there because they really very much like the people they're surrounded by, that they're going to be with and playing around for 4 and 5 years. You know, they can take it or leave it with us. After 2 hours, they're like, Coach, go home. So they like being able to see before I come visit. Oh, you know, I saw Kieran. He was taking a tour of the dorm room, and he was showing me all the cool things. And he just really laid out like, this is the best spot to hang out. This is the best place to get coffee. Like, I feel like I understand things that go on there. Like, that's what sold me into that side of it. And again, I'd be lying to say that I'm the one that produces the content. I will take the ownership of it. I come up with the ideas, but my assistant is fantastic. And Courtney, she does everything for me in terms of the editing, the splicing, the putting it together. So as much as I say it's me, it's not, it's all of her, that she's excellent with it. But yeah, that was the idea behind using the players. The whole session thing, it's funny because that brings me back to when we were talking about that search for support and education. That's really where I started doing that from. It was, I went to Spain. I think at the time, I'm going back now, this will be my 4th time this January, but I went the first time and I was like, okay, I learned this. I love it. Let me take a little bit of a leap of faith and start to put some stuff out there. And really it was an ask for feedback. Like it, you know, you see all types of stuff on Twitter, like the trolls come out from every bridge known to man on that thing. And everybody's so quick to cut people down. So I think as long as you can keep guiding your post, being like, listen, please just keep it, you know, G-rated, give me some feedback, give me some suggestions, because really all I was looking for is, well, you know, like if this person says I can tweak this exercise and you can work on this, love it. You just gave me another exercise that I can use the same drill for with another emphasis and focus that maybe I didn't see or didn't understand. So it was more of kind of just being brave and throwing it out there. And it actually happened during COVID. I was trying to take Tovo and figure out how do I use this. We needed, I think it was a 3 to 5 feet barrier where it had to be like, you couldn't be touching anybody within 3 to 5 feet when COVID first came out from the athletic rule side. Like we could practice, but there had to be this barrier. So it really just stretched my learning and coaching, because I was like, I have all this great content. Now I can't fully introduce it because I have these weird, this weird pandemic going on. So I just started like splicing stuff together and trying to like sort it out and figure it out. And I was getting a really good feedback back. And then it finally just got to the point where I was like, oh, maybe these sessions aren't too bad. Like people are like, oh, I like them. Oh, I used it and it worked. I'm like, that's awesome. Like I love the feedback and I love, you know, the compliments are nice, but like really it was more of me trying to figure out, do I know what the heck it is that I'm talking about, and just keep getting feedback. So it worked in that pros and cons we were talking about early on, where my worry was the negatives, is everybody's going to barrage you with all of these negative comments and it just push you out from not wanting to do it and cut you down. And really it was, you get a couple of those, but I was overwhelmed with the positivity that other people just come out of the woodwork with. They're like, Coach, loved your stuff. Maybe if you move this player here, maybe this will come out more. And I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Like that was the stuff I was after. So that's just kind of how I got into it. But yeah, I love the whole sharing thing. Like people always ask all the time, like my wife asked me all the time, she goes, aren't you afraid that like you literally just did that session last week? Like, why would you put your stuff out there? And I was like, no, I get what you're saying. But in the end of the day, you can have the practice plan, but you still have to know how to facilitate it. So like I started to worry less because I was like, not many people understand positional play. And even if they do get it and I post, I'm like, you still got to know what you're doing to be able to go talk and walk this through it. And a lot of people are actually scared of introducing something that new. So like they won't go and just steal it. So for me, I ended up kind of laughing a little bit more about it. So now I'll start to release my sessions like maybe a month and a half after, just because that sticks in the back of your head. But at the same point, I still think like unless you know how to teach it or how to like facilitate it, I'm not worried about it. And honestly, in the end of the day, that's what it's about anyway. If I could take something from you and it makes me better, and you could take something from me and it makes you better, like ultimately that's what we're all about. Like if I lose a game here or there because of it, I think that would be a long ways down the road before stuff like that starts to happen. But like, I just want to get content and get better. Like that's really what I'm after. So, but yeah, it was a weird cycle how that all came out.
The one thing that I love is that you said I went over for Tovo and then I'm going in January for my fourth time. Do you learn something each time you go that you didn't realize before, or is it because there's so much information, or you've talked about kind of your maturing as a coach and how you now see things a little bit differently. Is that kind of part of that development as well?
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah. I think it's something where, and it's funny because you always hear that whole that quote or the rumor like, well, as soon as you stop learning, or if you think you know it all, you should stop coaching. I really do think it's that. I think people get very comfortable with what works and what gives you good success, which I get. But I think the game for us changes just about every 3 years. Styles start to change. Like with the last World Cup, everybody wanted to play a 3-5-2 because the 3-5-2 is having great success. Now every team I see plays a 3-5-2. I think those are just the things that people don't want to feel left behind. So when the game changes, it's a matter of, are you willing to research it and check it out? Because for me, it's just learning and understanding the information. Doesn't mean I have to use it or implement it, but at least know what it's all about. So yeah, going back to Spain, I think one, I just enjoy the place. Like if I could afford it, I would love to move there and live there. It's just awesome. It's just a very different environment, and it has the soccer, or I should say football culture is very existent there, where here you're battling the other big four sports. But yeah, I think I got something new every single time. I mean, the staff is amazing. Todd Bean and Oscar that's out there that used to work for, he had, I think it was the U9 Barcelona team for ages. And they were arguably, as if you laugh, you can kind of say this, the best U9 team in the world for years on end. But like, he was having them do things we were doing in the college environment. So it was awesome just to watch those things, to pick up their lingo and how they make things easier. My take on positional play and why I gravitated towards it is it's about shapes and numbers in terms of like just making small sided advantages. It just resonated with me because that was the way I learned. So for me, it simplified teaching and understanding the game, where I could see it in shapes and angles and distances, instead of saying, okay, when the wing forward is tucked in, the outside back and the center mid have to be on diagonals and they have to be here. My brain's already exploded just trying to repeat that. I'm just like, it's too much. Whereas you could just find simplistic ways. So I think the biggest takeaway for me in the last couple of years for coaching education, I've come to this epiphany of, it's all about analogies. And I just ran with it. So example, I'm teaching my freshmen how to create open passing lanes from me straight to you. Well, if there's a defender in between the two of us, I'm now going to relate it to driving. Every single kid on my team has driven a car or has been in a car. If there's a defender between you and me, it's a car crash. On the road, you're not going to take your car and ram it through that car crash, are you? And then somebody says, no, I'm going to go around it. Perfect. Why would you go around it? Well, it's a better passing lane. I'm like, say it again. I'm like, that's it. I'm like, so all we're going to refer to this is if it's you, then me, it's a green highway. Drive on, meaning you could pass that ball. If it's me, defender, then you, now I'm just going to yell out to you, it's a red highway. Drive another route. So we've just changed our lingo. And in games, I know coaches and people probably think I'm absolutely insane because they're like, what's he talking about? Green highway and car crash and this and that and the other thing. I'm like, it's not for them. It's for us. I'm like, that's what just makes the learning and the understanding so much quicker, the recall quicker. I could just say, find a green highway, or, hey, live when you're dribbling. Okay, green highways, instead of saying, Susie, open passing lane. Kathy, get to the left. So and so, do this. Like, you don't have time to do all that. Plus, you don't want to create robots. So if I could just yell out a prompt and it just makes them think back as to what that is and they can go and execute it, I feel like we're finding our way. So that to me has been the ultimate thing the last 2 years is I use analogies for everything as much as possible. So that seems to have really resonated with the players because now instead of coach language, it's I'm talking in their language, but with coach intentions. So it's helped.
You shared your wife's concern about sharing the practice plans and what have you. What has she been like being part of the coaching journey to kind of worry about little things like that, but also know what it's like to be competitive and the time it takes to put into it? What has she been like throughout this entire journey?
She's a good balance. I mean, it's I got married later in life, so I met her when I was, I think it was 38 when I first met her. I think a lot of things came from it. The immaturity and picking the wrong people is already out of the picture. You got that out of your system in college. Um, then I think you found a job and an occupation you like, and you're a little bit more solidified. So now it's a matter of can you find a partner that's mature enough to be when you're not home or you have to travel, are they going to be okay with that? Can they be independent and do things on their own? It's tough. I mean, honestly, coaching in college athletics, this was years ago. I don't know if the stat is still the same, but it was the number one occupation for divorces. And I get it. It's you're constantly on the road recruiting. You're on the road for games. You're at practices. You come home late at night. Like for my situation, for instance, I am so thankful that my wife loves sports and is understanding of what I do and supports me because literally my current job is an hour and a half away from the house that I own and my wife because she has a job where my last job, it was in that area. So we all lived and worked in the same area. But once I took the new position, I'm now an hour and a half south of that. So in preseason, I literally go 2 weeks without seeing my wife. In season for the rest of the year, I don't see her basically from Monday morning all the way till Saturday after my game. Then I drive an hour and a half home after I got back to the college after usually probably like a later road trip. Drive an hour and a half home to see and sleep at home Saturday night, all day Sunday, and then Monday, usually like late morning, I drive an hour and a half back to work. I couldn't do that and feel good if I didn't have the support from her to make all that work. I probably would still be at the last school being miserable. She could see my mental health deteriorating at the last place I was at. She knew I had to make a change because what I wanted to do, I just could not do where I was at. So she actually saw that and was pushing me to make changes. So I think I just really got lucky with it. I think getting married later in life, I understood what my priorities were in myself, in my job, and just in wanting to be with other people. So the only thing that we've battled with is I had to get two TVs put in my one room back home in the house because she's a American football fan, and I grew up really not watching that, and I was a European football fan. So now we kind of have the crossovers. Is that she watches EPL in the morning with me, as long as I can deal with her yelling at the Steelers when they play every weekend. So it's been funny how it worked out, but it's been a little bit of both. Is I learned about American football. I learned about her once. I secretly think she likes when I'm not home because I can't drive her crazy. So I think she likes that I have to leave and then come back later on. So I can't drive her nuts. So it's been an interesting journey, but it seems like that's a very common thing in our occupation. And it really just comes down to having an independent and strong person as your partner. And I was lucky enough I was able to find that. So Erin's been great for me. She keeps me in line.
Last question, and then we'll shut this thing down. Is you mentioned dad being a wrestling coach. What has the experience of like growing up with a dad that was a coach, and now you're a coach? What are what were the conversations like? Early on, even now. What's that dynamic been where it's not just like father son, but now it's kind of coach to coach in some of the conversations?
Yeah, it's been interesting and it's definitely evolved over the years. Early on, when I was leaving high school, going to college, like I didn't know what to major in, but coaching, sports, and teaching all ran in every person in my family. My extended family and my immediate family were all teachers or coaches in some facet. So I knew athletics was definitely where I wanted to be, but I didn't really understand that you could be full time in that background in high school, college, and so on. Like I thought, like I just thought you had to be in the teaching realm and work in athletics. So once I started getting a little bit older, I started to understand there's different levels to it and how you can make a living at it and what's kind of involved. I was like, all right, I know that sports and teaching sports had to be somewhere in the background, whether it was in addition to a work job or if it was the work job. So going to college, I went in as an education major. And when you go in with the understanding of all you want to major in is soccer and girls, you don't get very far, very, very long when you're there. So I quickly learned that you have to put a little bit more time and importance into your studies, or you won't be there doing those things very long. So I was influenced, we'll say, to potentially switch the major because I wasn't quite holding up my end of the deal. So I went to sports management, and that's kind of what really opened my eyes in terms of, well, you could work in facilities of sports. You could work in player contracts and sport law. You could work in coaching. You could work in event management. I didn't realize there were so many different little worlds inside the athletic or sports world. So those were the things I started to realize. So I'm like, okay, this is it. And then just from the competitive side, like you said, playing wise, it's so hard to give it up. Like I compete when I'm trying to get out the door as fast as I can. Like I want to beat everybody and be first to the car. Like it's something that's in you when you're an athlete. You just like that competitive feel. So I think it always drew you back to wanting to be involved with sports. So for me, like I don't have children since I was married later in life. So it was a matter of like, I want to stay in the sports world. I'm too old to play. I don't have children. What do we do? I was like, you got to get involved. And that's kind of how the coaching part started taking off a little bit. But yeah, it was keeping sports in my life. I liked the education and teaching side, and I didn't really like that till I went for my master's. When I went for my master's, I almost had a 4.0. When I was in undergrad, I'm ashamed to even tell you what my GPA was because, again, I was just trying to major in soccer and in sport and in girls, and that wasn't giving me a grade point average where I'm going to be successful. So yeah, it was like you had to get serious, you had to figure it out, and that's just kind of where it ran. So I haven't looked back since, really.
Frank, this chat has been awesome, and that is a perfect way to shut this thing down. This is Karen, Coach's Corner Chats with Frank Carrozza, and I'm out. Peace.